So, how are you today, Harry?
Uh, I don't know. I don't really. I kind of feel lost in my life.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's maybe good to recognize.
Yes.
That's a good thing to answer. I usually have to think about it too. I don't have an answer ready for how I'm doing. I can just say fine, but
Yeah.
I
I've
need,
tried that one too.
yeah, I need to take a little time to actually look at it and deal with it. Anyway, hello everybody. Hello Red. Hello Grace, I think it was. Hi. And
Hi.
hello Kitty. I forgot the kitty's name.
Naya.
And Naya?
No, just Naya.
Leia. Oh, cool. All right.
Stop eating my hand. She's eating my hand like this. Look.
Yep. Oh, it's a little hungry, likes biting things. Oh, and Sam has a doggy. Well, the dog can meet the cat. And, yeah.
The species meeting.
Yeah, let's see what they're going to talk about. Yeah.
Look at that. Look at that. Look at that, Tia.
The dog and cat.
The dog is not talking.
The dog is chill.
There are several.
I've got 3.
Oh. What are their names?
This is Tia. Her twin is Hera. And my 7-year-old is Zeus.
Zeus.
Shoes?
Zeus.
Zeus. Okay. Tia, Hera, and Zeus. Okay, well, Hera and Zeus go well together, at least.
So do Hestia. Hestia was sister of Hera.
Ah, okay, good. Well, that's good to sort out.
My 14-year-old daughter told me that.
Okay. I wasn't clear on that. Okay, well, we're just starting with a sort of a check-in on where everybody is. I mean, maybe that's what we're already doing. I'm never sure if it's a good idea or not, but it allows everybody to sort of tell us where they're at and so forth. So, so how are you guys today?
Sorry I missed last week. Sorry.
It's okay.
Last week was my daughter's first day in school this year, so I had to take a special morning, so glad to be back.
Okay.
I'm Sam, by the way. I think we haven't met all of you.
Okay.
So I'm Red, for anybody who hasn't met me before. Hi.
Hi.
And Grace is here, and Grace has got somebody she wants to show us as well, I think.
Today I went to my friend Ryan's and I'm going there tomorrow again, and his toy's just coming to have like a sleepover. He's wearing one of my little sister Lila's clothes.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
He's called Edward.
Yeah, Dagwood. Okay.
Edward.
Antwood.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought you first said Deadfoot.
Oh, well, it could all work, and
No,
he doesn't have much of a face.
It's probably because he's just sewn on. You might be able to see it a bit better now.
Okay, yeah, there's a nose and a little bit of a mouth. Okay, that's fine. Okay, I see it now. All right. Very cool. How are you today, Ron? How's Chicago?
I'm doing well. Chicago is kind of rainy today, but it's not raining at the moment. I'm glad to see that we're starting off the generations conversation with some of the same generations we had last week. So I'm enjoying that continuity. And I'm glad to see everybody.
Okay, and Sophie, are you there? Are you hiding, or is your
Oh, yeah.
video not working?
No.
Hello,
Hi,
Sophie.
everybody. Hello, Fleming. Hello, everybody. I'm not hiding. I'm trying to get a connection from another computer, but it's very slow or it won't let me. So I've invited another generation, but I think there's some maths exercises in the way. So I'm not so sure if the other generation will succeed in the maths exercise to join us later. And anyway, at the moment, I cannot be visible. So it's nice to see everybody again and to meet Edward.
Okay, cool. Okay, so
we're
yeah.
cracking nuts.
We're cracking nuts.
You're cracking
Lila,
nuts.
Did you see the sign that I did? No. That bit of paper? Mm-mm.
We've been picking hazelnuts from our orchard. We've got a few hazelnut bushes, and this is what they look like when they first come off. They're a little bit green. They're supposed to be brown, but if you leave them on the tree, the squirrels get them.
Ah.
So we take them early and brown them up at home.
Okay.
If they last that long, because they usually get eaten by my kids.
Ah.
So that's us, cracking nuts.
Cracking nuts. That's cool. I haven't had hazelnuts from a bush for a long time.
I like that one.
Okay, so let's, well, I don't really know what we're going to do. The experiment is just that we bring several generations in here. What we do with them is another story. So it's some kind of conversation. Ideally, it's something emerging, something will happen, something will come out of it that we maybe didn't know or realize in advance. So we will somehow be ready for that and notice it when it happens, maybe.
So sorry for my memory. Tim, what is your friend's name one more time?
My friend, my daughter, you mean?
Your
here.
daughter.
This is Lila.
Lila.
She is my friend as well.
These are old here, okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Lila, Lila.
Oh, Lila, okay.
That's Sam. You want to say hello?
Hi, Lila.
Papa, she listened to that sign that I did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's read that.
Yeah.
And has she been, is that the ones from that sign that she's eating now?
So I'll give you the backstory. Grace has left signs all over the house with instructions on what we can and can't do.
Ah.
And one of them involves the nuts.
Lila, have you been eating them out of the basket? Yes. Why didn't you eat?
Maybe a few, but not too many.
You could have eaten those out there and left all the ones in the basket.
Well, you know what, G, her reading's not that great yet. So you know.
You could have told her.
I think he didn't want to tell her.
So for anybody who hasn't realised, then Grace and Lila are sisters. Welcome to sibling wars.
That's very cool. Even if you weren't, I think it would be cool if Grace was leaving like notes in all of our houses and what we could or couldn't do. I think that would be perfectly lovely.
I think that's probably entirely within Grace's character. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see emerging leadership.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, you see, when you see a sign of what you're supposed to not do, you have a choice. You can decide to do what you're supposed to do, or you can do what you really want to do. So that's quite interesting.
So Lila, Grace, what do you think Tim and Rhett do on Wednesday mornings here? What do you think we're actually trying to do?
Don't know. I'm at my friend. My friend's mama. She does like a school thing, so I do that on Wednesdays. I've only just come back. They finish at 3.
Yeah, it's 4 o'clock here. That's why the confusion over the morning thing. I don't know if Lila has anything to say. Do you have anything to say? What do you think we're doing here, Lila?
Lila, why did your dad get on these calls every Wednesday?
Well, Lila seems to like them too. Like she's usually there, and she seems to pay just as much attention as Tim does.
I've noticed.
So yeah, it would be interesting. Why is this interesting to kids too? I don't know. I mean, they should answer it, but I can start guessing that. I mean, we have a lot of different faces. We do different things, and some of us actually mirror what Lila is doing. So we can sort of interact that way and do funny things. So we're maybe more fun than television. Well, she's eating a lot of the nuts now, so I don't know about that sign.
We are television.
Yeah, this is better than television.
In the UK, do kids use the term play date?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, play dates. Yeah.
Hey, Fleming, this is our play date on Wednesday morning, isn't it?
It is.
Is that a piano, Grace?
Behind us, yeah.
It's the piano?
Yeah, it's all on there.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Papa's got one as well.
Oh, nice. Are we going to see it? Wait a minute, was that it?
The brown bit.
It's there to the right.
Mine is not so beautiful, but it sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a little thing.
Oh, yeah. But it's like wooden. It's not a plastic electronic keyboard. Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah.
Fine.
Yours is wooden as well.
What do you do with the pillow?
What?
Yeah.
What's that, Grace?
I was talking to my mum.
Oh, I didn't realize.
That's
a little performance for you.
That's pretty nicely played there. So you all play piano sort of officially, or what do you do? A bit, yeah.
Don't do it anymore now. I did do a bit, and I don't really do it.
Yeah, I did it too a little bit when I was a kid, a year or two of piano classes. But one probably doesn't have to. Like my son, now he's 30 or something, but when he was a kid and he was in school, particularly in the US, one would always, every year there would be performances. Anybody who can play an instrument or something, they would get up and little kids would play the violin and so forth, and they practiced all year to do the show in front of everybody. And for some reason, my son signed up for that show, even though he couldn't actually officially play anything. But he has this sort of confidence where he thought he wanted to be in that too. So he brought a little one of these little Casio pianos, electronic pianos, and he alone went up on stage. He was 8 or something, and he sat and played on that piano. He couldn't really play anything, but it didn't sound any worse or better than anybody else for that matter. But I was both impressed and a little puzzled about what made him do that. Like, he was perfectly all right with that. He hadn't practiced for months and months. He just sort of pushed the buttons, and it sounded interesting, and he sat down and they applauded just as much as for everybody else. So I kind of like that kind of guts.
Yeah, the performance was just the same. Not about the music or the practice. The
Yeah,
performance.
yeah, he was even more into it. He got sort of the attitude right. He had sort of worked that on how you need to look when you're when you're playing the piano.
I like that, just kind of just playing with not necessarily knowing what you're going to do. And it's pretty, even if you're a highly schooled musician, it's a pretty good attitude to have when you're playing, though.
But I notice also it's maybe hard when you start learning it. It's that with many things. Like I like dancing a lot, and I notice that when you start taking classes, they start teaching you 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. Yeah, they give you sort of steps to follow, and suddenly it becomes something sort of you need to think about, a little complicated, and so it's years before you then can get back to just sort of having fun dancing and expressing yourself. And that's
it can be years, and that is just a beautiful illustration of probably my main complaint, if I may state my complaint, about the outmoded medieval didactic nature of learning. It's still so widely prevalent. And you can lose years. If you're really versatile, you can try to work your way through it. And I still see this all the time with guitar students who are in school, and when we get together, we don't do it that way. And they tell me that this is different from school. You really learn. and just fooling around on the piano, I think, is one good way for example, of doing that. You just fool around on the piano. In fact, that's the best thing you can do, I think, in my opinion. And I'm an experienced music teacher, so it's a professional opinion. I always ask students to make sure they spend some time fooling around and not doing what we worked on.
Cool. I recognize that. I had my best skiing experience when I just got on the skis. I went downhill and it felt great.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, you need lessons. And then it became boring and cumbersome. And I have the same. I'm a designer, but the most things I do spontaneously are the best. And I start working on it, and then I get back to where I started. Same here.
You're able, so you can get that flow going when you in the designing process. You're not, so you're not held back by that kind of problems we were talking about.
Oh yes, but I can be playing or I can be working, and working is very serious and it takes a lot of time. But the results are approximately the same.
Well, I think we also have some people here from Norfolk, I believe, who sort of run education in a little bit of a different manner. Or maybe they can give us some tips on how one can avoid this sort of, you learn something that's not really very alive, and you got to learn it correctly, and it will be years before you even find out what you can do with it, which is what most people call education of any kind. So it'd be nice to get a different perspective.
Yeah, well, I can say that basically what you've just described about just fooling around with things, I think that's kind of what I've seen as being a really good approach to education, is just to put a lot of material around for them to fool around with, and then just let them do it by themselves. That seems to be what we've done, and it seems to work. Things like reading and writing and things. I mean, we've never taught the girls any of those things. They just kind of had books around and seen us reading and writing, or heard us speaking. Children learn to walk by themselves and talk by themselves and everything else by themselves, as far as I can see so far. So it's the same with the pianos. We've each got pianos in our houses, but we don't do piano lessons. We just fool around at the piano. It's been really amazing watching Grace have her favorite songs that she wants to play on the piano. And so she'll just go and play with the piano until she works out how to do it, just by hearing it herself in her head. I don't know. How do you do it, Grace?
I don't really know. I just try and find the right keys, make the right sound, and then I do it. That's how I really sort of do it.
Yeah, like that. So yeah, I think it's just a case of putting as many raw materials or instruments or tools around and just making them freely available, but then stepping back and letting them play. And if you've got anything to add.
Sorry, yeah, I was going to say, my experience of having children has shown me quite clearly that play is the most sophisticated form of learning the universe has ever seen. It's the most elegant, it's fun, it's easy, everyone can do it, and it's really, really effective, and it's a whole form way of learning where you can learn all the subjects at once. That's what I've seen. So only, so far, Grace is 8 years old, getting on for 9. And she's taught herself to read and reads voraciously now.
And I'm nearly 6.
And you're nearly 6. And I don't, we just are watching them to see when we need to do proper school, but it may never happen. So I don't know.
Sometimes schooling and lessons are beneficial. I was on a brief ski trip for a weekend on a music gig years ago, and it was the only skiing I ever did. But the band leader was a friend of the ski instructor, and she gave us brief instructions on how to do it. So I just never would have made it without that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely when it's useful too. For example, Gracie was really into swimming lots, and we were going every week. But then I could see that it might be beneficial if she just had somebody else to give her a bit more support with some of it. So we had a few swimming lessons for a while, which really helped out. But I think it's it's sort of waiting for that impulse from the child to sort of signal that they need that bit of extra support with something, rather than just forcing it onto them at the beginning. That's what I've found.
So Mama hasn't done anything, hasn't let me do any more swimming lessons this month.
You want to do some more swimming lessons?
Yeah, Mama says Mama's just not really doing it yet.
We'll do it.
You haven't let her.
We'll do some more. We're still getting back into the swing of everything after summer holidays and things. So we'll do swimming lessons.
I didn't bring any generations in person, but I do have some images, and it's a little bit of a backstory about some generations. And if it's all right, if I would share the screen, I'll show them. And Harry was here when I tested this, so it should kind of work. I'm going to try this. Maybe it's a double click. Oh, here we go. We're getting there.
Yes.
We see it.
One more second here. That is Amelie, and in her guitar lesson, and about 7 years old, and obviously a pretty young generation. And I can't go on and on about her too much because she is just a ball of fire and just pours herself into everything, every art and science, and she's warm and loving, and it's just really something. And her mom took this picture at Guitar Friends Studio, which is my studio. And on the left is that's her mom, Aisha. And and that's also Kimberly, her aunt. And they also studied guitar at the studio. So my relationship with in their generational network is through music, and I will. Here it is. Yeah, I will never forget the night that they performed in one of our shows that we used to do monthly shows with students, not only once a year but every month, and they were in that show. It was about a little over 7 years ago, or a little less than 7 years ago. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's Aisha. She played in the set, and there's Kimberly, and there's Aisha and Kimberly again. The cursor might be too small for you to see. Anyway, the thing that was really unforgettable for me was not the show, but after the show, everybody was still milling around. It was at a restaurant, cafe, performance venue, and everyone was still eating and drinking. And it was so very convivial after the show, and Amelie's family and other families and various people were there. It was just a warm scene. I can't forget it. And in the midst of it, Amelie's mom, Aisha, brought the baby Amelie over to me and let me hold her. She was about 2 months old. It's just an incredible memory. She was, and then she was warm, and she cuddled in my arms. And she's still just as warm as she was at 2 months. And oh, let me see how to get this back. And there she is right after she was born. So I got to hold her about 2 months later. And oh, okay. Then all these people were at the show that night. And there's Amelie. That's not the night of the show, but all these people were there. And so I remember them all and many other people. And there's Amelie, I don't know, was she about 3 or 4 years old there? And on the left is Tenzi, her aunt, and behind her there's Aisha, her mom, and there's Sergio, her grandfather, and Maridel, her grandmother, and there's Kimberly, her aunt, and Aisha and Kimberly performed in that memorable show that night. It was after the show that was so memorable. And then, so that night, there was all kinds of cross-generational communication. And that was part of what did I just, I was saying that outmoded learning was my main peeve, but maybe not. Maybe it's the generational segregation and really all kinds of segregation, which I wish could be reduced. And I was thinking about a particular person last week. There she is on the right. That's Eden. She's a bass and guitar student. And there's Amanda, her mom. And Eden could not go to a performance of some other people who were also at that show 7 years ago. But they're now performing around town, and she couldn't go to their show because of the alcohol license problems. I just hate that kind of segregation. So now that music can't be shared across the generations. And there's Caroline and Schaefer. They studied at the studio, and they're performing, and they're the show that Eden could not go see because she's not old enough to drink. And I'm not going to try to sum up much, but I think probably you could see themes running through all this, and it has to do with barriers to cross-generational interaction, and so that's probably a good enough summation. And so Eden was one of the catalysts in the chain of events that led to this week's conversation. And so I think I'm just going to put this presentation to bed with Amelie taking a rest after she was born. And I will try to bring us back. So those are my friends that across generations that I could only bring virtually today. And the Amelie's family knows Carolyn Schaefer's family, and they performed at that show that night. Eden's family does not know the Amelie's family. Probably don't know who's who with all the names at this point, but they're still kind of related, at least in my brain, through the musical network. And so music served as a conduit across generations and through contemporary silos too. So it's through time and space, kind of, or some kind of space. And that's really kind of like what music does. It provides the connection. And so it's really not the music that counts, it's the human connection that's the point of it. And it's part of the reason why I felt and feel and stated last week how I feel about the greater segregation that's really necessary. And I just like to, and then Tim, really it was your idea then to do this today. And you stated it as my idea, but I wouldn't have thought of it. So thanks to you, we meet here today with that theme. I can't think of anything else. That's all I got.
You know, the thoughts that I come up with when you're speaking, Ron, are this idea of what actually segregates these generations. You know, and we have these notions, often faulty, I think, of what is appropriate, right? What is appropriate to share with children, or what is appropriate for them to see, or what is appropriate for them to be around. And some of us choose those inappropriate items partially, I think, to segregate themselves. You know, people go to bars so they can, you know, just interact with people 21 and over. And yet, if I think back on the way we used to live, I believe, as villages, you know, everybody was everywhere, right? And if the the village elders were around, I really wonder whether or not, you know, there were kids running around or whether, you know, they were just completely excluded. I doubt that they were excluded to that extent. That's my imagery I'd like to believe in, you know, this village feel.
I think that states it well.
I like the word village feel. It's like here as well.
I'm sorry, Harry. I didn't quite get that. Was it just me? My connection?
Probably not.
He likes the village feel thing.
I get that it's a question of the definition of the community. Sam, you were mentioning, and Harry said he liked. Interesting that alcohol was mentioned in writing about segregating and preventing different generations to meet together and enjoy the music or the concerts or the show. It's a good job there's no alcohol on the digital way of communicating, so we can do anything. Or everything. Yeah, everything. Cool.
Well, I think it
Yeah,
gives an answer sort of to well, conversation, because even though we don't have to limit it in any particular way, we often do. Like, we somehow put up some boundaries of, well, what is this for and who's invited? And I kind of like also the village feel thing where just anybody can wander in, or there's sort of an organic kind of feel to it, because it's not just either that random things happen. There's a certain sort of integrity in a village kind of thing. There are relationships that are already there. It's not just sort of random whoever pops in. It flows a certain way, but there's no particular limit to who or what. It's not like the kids are over there and the old people, we keep them over there. So I think it's interesting that somehow, in some ways, we keep a segregation online, even when it's not necessary. And I'm wondering how to overcome that, or make it less likely that we segregate each other.
It's part of a bigger cycle that we're in, because with the whole scientific viewpoint, we split everything up into little bits and isolated it and thought that was the way to understand everything. And it feels to me like we're kind of spiraling past that now and coming back towards wholeness and ways to be whole, perhaps in a more sophisticated way than the last time round. But that seems to be, all these things seem to tie together, you know, the playing, the fluidity of playing, and the kind of crossing of boundaries and the mixing of subjects that happens in play. And the way music kind of dissolves boundaries, all those things seem to fit into the village feel for me. I love that phrase too, Harry.
My brain lit up when you made that distinction about the change. I think what we can also just kind of see is reflected to a fair extent just in plain old history. But I mean, for at least the past 500 or 1,000 years or something, you know, things have been coming more and more apart and more analytical, and it's pretty useful and can do an awful lot of stuff with it. And I think you're right that we are spiraling past it and trying to balance it out by putting things back together. And I think it is reflected in almost everything we do. Yeah. And then people do tend to self-segregate often into whatever groups, professional or cultural or age or let's see. Yeah, I mean, I have a group of people that I know that are, and I've also interacted musically with people of all ages for sure, and had, you know, I can remember some students who were in their 80s, and I haven't had anybody in their 90s yet as a student, but I'm looking forward to that. But anyway, the point being that I have noticed a lot of self-segregating. People that are supposed to be old kind of want to keep it that way, and to some extent it's understandable, but it just seems too extreme. And yeah, and they're in old people's I have some friends that are just kind of in an old people's facility. I don't mean a care facility. It's just that they just segregate there socially, kind of, and live there. You know, a big apartment building. And I just don't know why they have to do that.
I saw somewhere there was I saw somewhere there was some place that had set up a kind of early years setting inside of an old people's setting.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Alongside each other. I don't know if everybody else has seen that too. It just seemed like it was great for everybody, that thing. It brought everybody to more life and there's beautiful interactions going on.
I did see that. And what's wrong with me lately? I keep complaining about the things that are wrong. I usually don't take that tack. Last week or two, I've been complaining. So, I mean, that's a great positive example. I did see that.
Yeah, Ron, stop complaining.
You know, this idea that some of us have intended outcomes for a particular time period or for a particular place or a particular group of people kind of stimulates them to think about the optimal way to achieve that outcome. And that optimal way will select who's there, who's not there. So a lot of what we're trying to do when we're trying to achieve something, a secondary effect of that is a bifurcation of who's appropriate, who's not appropriate. And I think we have a lot of that going on. We have this desire to achieve, this desire to succeed, this desire to make something of some place or someone or some group. And so we start thinking, oh, well, you know, this is extraneous, that's not necessary, let me bring these people in. That's an exclusionary act. So it happens a lot more and it's a lot more pervasive, I think, than we realize.
Yeah. She's trying to eat my jumper again.
I'm just going to say that I was really lately watching a group of, I think, six children who were aged between 3 and nearly 9, as Grace is. We were up at the coast where there's lots of creeks, and somebody had an inflatable raft, and it was just amazing to watch that group of children aged between 3 and 9 completely work out by themselves how to get the raft in the water, how to kind of row together. There was a set of oars on it, how to row it together without going around in circles, how to actually make it go forwards, how to get over the shallow bits where they couldn't row because it was too shallow, and watching them look after the 3-year-olds while they were doing it as well. And, you know, at some point, everybody had to all pick up this raft to get over the shallow bits, including the 3-year-olds. But the older ones sort of positioned themselves around the outside, so they'd be in the stronger positions, and they put the 3-year-olds in the lighter carrying positions. And just really beautiful to watch them all so competent and so capable of doing group processes and working out solutions to problems physically with their whole bodies by themselves with no external input at all. I was really amazed and impressed and wondered if that's, you know, a new thing with children, or has it always been that way? Have children always had these amazing capacities that we sometimes just don't see because we put them in a classroom and we're, you know, judging them on other criteria?
The cat.
Meanwhile, the kitten is breastfeeding on Grace.
On a jumper. Seems to like this jumper.
So this is very interesting, as like often the way we've sort of split up the world, some well-intentioned person have tried to figure out what the best way of doing it. Like this rafting, this would be appropriate for kids of this age that have gone through this program. But by limiting or splicing it up like that, it sort of limits the creativity and the actual learning about it. Whereas if you give it more freedom, then one will learn those things necessary. That, of course, the other 3-year-olds have a harder time doing certain things, so we need to take care of that. And you wouldn't have learned that if somebody had already solved the problem in advance. And often they've solved it sort of badly. I mean, sort of the kind of thing that you go through piano lessons in order to learn to play the piano, but somehow you don't learn how to express yourself with music somehow in a traditional old-fashioned piano thing where you're just playing certain pieces again and again and again. So you might miss the most obvious thing from somebody's well-intentioned attempt of organizing it well in advance, where often we get a lot more out of it from the chaotic learning by ourselves, figuring out why we care about it, and we find our own threat through it, which we might not find if somebody has tried to force us to find a particular threat which is not ours.
Yeah, that's right. And I think coming back to the idea or the thoughts about segregation, I think in a lot of the school systems nowadays, we suffer because children are so segregated they're segregated into year groups. So you get a lot of children of the same age all together. Then they miss out on that fundamental learning, which is how do we take care of each other? You know, how do we take care of the smaller ones if they're not around smaller ones during the day when they're trying to work out problems and do things together, and they never have the opportunity. So I think it's really important to mix up the generations like that, and bring in older people as well, and really young ones. I think that is one of the benefits of educating outside of a regular school system, is children come into contact with all ages of people and doing all sorts of different things, so they get that opportunity.
Two small thoughts. My dad's family, he's one of 11 kids from my grandparents. So every 4 years, that set of families gets together for a little family reunion. I have about 36 cousins. And so we have a lot of interaction, in a wide range of age groups. And that's really fun to see. And then Fleming, harking back to something you said to either Lila or Grace when they said, hey, if someone tells you to do something, you can either do it or choose to do what you want to do. One of the earliest examples I want to say about this is in the US. I don't know if it's true elsewhere, but in the US, when you first have a baby, the doctors recommend, let the baby sleep by themselves, they'll work out their crying. And I thought, that's the stupidest advice I've ever heard, I wanted to sleep with my babies. I didn't want them in a separate crib. So I completely dismissed all that advice. And I admit I enjoyed it, So it's one of these silly things I see being advised. And of course, now there's some advice coming back the other way. But it is curious how little people can know and yet how freely they want to give advice about what you should do. Anyway, that's one of the things that I wanted to do that was intergenerational that just sounded very silly to me, this whole idea of having babies sleep separately.
I don't know. Been there, done that.
There's something yummy on that jumper.
Likes it. Maybe it's because it's made of some. Maybe she likes the smell of it or something. I don't know.
I think she's trying to breastfeed, but it's not working.
Yes, she's trying. She can't understand why there isn't any milk coming out of my jumper.
It's strange.
She's got a bowl of milk in the kitchen, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't work with any jumpers.
I guess if you're a very young kitten, it's good to just try everything you can find with the instincts you have, and hopefully you'll find some of the right stuff once in a while.
You might get lucky.
They do that. Sorry?
You might get lucky.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm very familiar with cats doing that, so I know exactly what it's like.
There's another kitty.
And she's not trying to feed, or he. Well, sometimes they do that even as adults.
You want to see the other cat? You want to see the other cat, Aya? There, you can look. You want to go back there?
So this is Lucifer.
Well, he looks like a Lucifer.
Yeah. What a great name.
I call him Lucy, and some people think then that he's female, but he's actually a boy. When I found Lucifer, he was smaller than Grace's hand, and his eyes were still glued shut. And he was scrawny and had barely been born, I guess, less than 24 hours ago. And there was no mother, no other siblings, nothing around. So I put him in a paper bag and took him home.
It looks like you did it well.
Yeah, he got to be about 16 pounds.
Did you have to breastfeed him?
I tried. The very first night, he was so weak. I put him on my chest, and he could barely move. So he slept the whole night on my chest, but he didn't try to nibble.
Nice.
And Ron has a cat too. White with a gray stripe.
A pretty chill cat.
And Harry has a Hello Kitty.
Yeah. I don't know why he is so chill. This is Sunny. And he's usually has this play instinct that turns into clawing, and didn't we see that from one of the kittens earlier? Yeah. But he is very chill. I don't get it. That never happens. Your kitten is there. She is on the shoulder. Now he's starting to bite.
There we go. There we go.
Sticking your nose up in my hair. What's he doing?
He's messing up your hair.
He isn't getting more funny.
I'm trying to figure out if she's trying to chew your hair, because they often do that.
I think she's trying to get up somewhere.
You may, yeah.
Yeah, you can sort of if you want to get down.
I know exactly what you're doing. I've been there. Bent over like that with the cat on the shoulder.
You know, our play date involves meeting like this where we can just share our pictures and images. But imagine a few years in the future, we can meet on a holodeck and our kittens can meet each other, and our dogs can meet each other on the holodeck, you know, and then we can play music, Ron, together. Have I told you I played a violin, Ron?
That'll be, hopefully anyway, it'll be more like that village feel.
Yeah.
Even more than it is now.
Lila, Grace, what's your favorite song?
I don't really have one. I don't really have one.
What's your favourite music you like to play all the time?
Or group or singer? Or what group or singer do you really not like?
Yeah, tell me yours, Sam. What's your favorite song?
For chamber music, it's got to be Beethoven and Brahms.
Is that a song?
Those quartets are the late quartets by Beethoven and the Brahms F minor piano quintet. Those are sublime. But for songs, I'll go with Katherine Jenkins as a singer.
Cool. Yeah, I wouldn't know how to answer it either, even though it's the kind of thing one always asks each other, what's your favorite something song? Those are the hardest questions for me.
The cat, every time she sucks on my jumper like this, she makes a wet patch where she's been sucking on it.
Then she moves on to another part that's not wet yet.
Yeah, and makes my little bits of my jumper wet. No, she's just like
So we're getting to the top of the hour, so you guys could maybe share how you think this has worked as an experiment to have a play date, essentially, an intergenerational play date.
And an interspecies one as well.
Interspecies one, yeah, definitely.
I felt it was grounding. It was grounding us. It was very pleasant, and some of us were spending a lot of time explaining something dear to them and something very special. I felt it was flowing easily. I suppose it's part of knowing each other better in our daily lives and what we care for.
I'll go along with that. Grounded, flowing, what we care for.
And I think one thing that works about it with having their children, their cats, and so forth, it sort of naturally gives us something to flow with, which in a certain way I think makes us, the rest of us, relax about it, where if otherwise we're a bunch of adults who are supposed to have a serious conversation, we maybe sometimes have a harder time just relaxing and letting it be a play date. We think something important should happen, but maybe we can learn something from the more relaxed, just hanging out in the village feel.
Sorry. Come on, Grace.
Look at there. She's in my jumper, like she's sort of sitting in it.
Did you enjoy being on the call?
Oh yeah. white layer being on it as
It's a
well.
perfect hammock.
Was it the first time that the village was mentioned among us? Was it? Yeah? Good? No? Fleming is saying no.
I don't know. It wasn't a huge revelation, but I think maybe it's the first time we talked about it like that.
It's kind of surprising, I think, that it hasn't been, I don't think it has been very explicit, whether it's been mentioned in passing or not. And it's such a, I mean, a commonly understood metaphor, but it's, I'm glad that we finally did kind of get very explicit about it, because it is such a good metaphor. And grounded in our evolutionary reality too. I mean, it's not just a abstract metaphor, it's our human reality.
I like your echo, Ron.
You got it too now.
Aha, aha.
Hello. I think it's when Sam has his microphone on. Is there? Oh, damn. We like the echo.
Echo, echo, echo.
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 Any other finishing remarks before we end?
I just pasted a little link into the chat window for a little mini rant, mini monologue on global villageness.
Excellent.
Gracie, I was very happy to meet you. Lila, I was very happy to meet you. Again.
And I was happy to meet all of you again. So I'd like to thank you all for coming, being part of our interspecies, intergenerational playdate conversation. Thank you all for coming. See you again another time. I don't have time to stay for a planning thing because I need to go, so we'll wing it. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. See you all some other time, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.